One of the things that has been fun about going back to school is access to a number of different articles, and I've been going down so many different rabbit holes, and the number of screens that are open on my Emory account. I tried to go through and um, uh, turn them off or X out of them, but one that's near and dear to my heart is food insecurity kind of things. But when I started thinking about being the non-anxious leader in an anxious age, it was finding a really cool article and the finding an article that really fits how I've always experienced being that non-anxious leader in certain situations. But since we were talking about youth, I wanted to first start with a PowerPoint to better understand some of the generations. And one of my colleagues at the college did this, spilling the tea on Gen Z, getting a better idea of who we're working with. Because does anybody know what the next generation is called?
Gen Alpha.
Gen Alpha.
And that's the group that is children now?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I think they're freshmen in high school down.
Oh, okay. Oh, boy.
Born in 2010.
Okay. So 14.
Yep.
So Dr. Smith created this for faculty and staff to better understand the college students. So I'm sure all of us can find ourselves there. But, and this is a little small, but look at the social markers for each of those generations, some of the slang terms, baby boomers, Gen X, what we're covering up is Gen Alpha, slang terms, Gen Z, fam, goat, slay, yes, queen, yes, queen. Think about the cars. Y'all were talking about the cars, iconic toys. When I shared this with my campus ministry group, they're like, well, we grew up on fidget spinners. And I said, yes, they were invented when y'all were, and you had them in middle school, but Gen Alpha has grown up with them since birth. So autonomous cars, smart speakers.
Is that a smart car? On the right all the way?
Autonomous.
Yeah.
That's like those cars that drive themselves.
Oh,
Like the Teslas and
The new Tesla taxis that are supposed to be coming out.
So Pastor Matt can be in a parking lot and it will drive in a parking lot. His Tesla will drive to him and pick him up at the front of the store.
That's scary.
that is scary.
Yeah.
But you
So
try
I'll
to
come
live
back
far.
to the
What if somebody hacks into it?
Yeah.
So the leadership style, that's interesting.
What row is that?
That's
The
the very
last.
bottom.
It's
Controlling, directing, coordinating.
the last one
That's
with
the
pictures.
builders.
Last one is what?
It's the last one with the pictures.
The triangles.
Oh, yeah.
Triangles and the L leaders and everything. Yeah.
I thought baby boomers were supposed to be controlling,
Yeah.
but it says not directing, I
I
guess.
think it probably depends on which baby boomers you're talking about.
Well,
Early or late.
I've met
Yeah.
Gen Z children are closer to their parents than Gen Z parents were to, or Gen X parents were to their parents. Again, Gen Z folks who are willing to work hard, they are very competitive. Job, what they're going to do, career is top of their mind. They are a lot more connected to their families. We have things at the college, and there are always parents who come, no matter what little thing it is, there's always been this present. The most diverse generation ever. Students in this generation have multiple friends, have schools that, for the most part, are diverse. They're seeing diversity in a much bigger way than ever before. And they want it now. They do not have patience. But, and this is important,
I'm like, oh.
That's the only Jensen.
Yeah.
Uh,
The free shipping, I see too, I'm like, oh, yeah.
service oriented, and all of these play into the Gen Alpha understanding as well, because while Gen Z would rather suffer in silence, and this is one of the things we have to fuss at college students, because they would just assume get a 0 on an assignment, then go talk to their professor. It's like, no, we want to help you. Help me help you. So when thinking and working with them, they know BS. So we need to be sure to be able to listen, asking them, recognizing that we're not asking staff and ourselves to be perfect, but we're asking for us to do our best. And that I want you to hear now, because I'm going to come back to that idea, working with Gen Alpha. Listen to the stories, help them tell their story, and listen out for what's really going on with them. So pulling from that picture of all of the different comparisons, they are more digital. They have grown up. The phone is their pacifier. Think about authenticity and fairness. They see the diversity and they want us to live into that understanding of red and yellow, black and white. They are precious in their sight. Well, live into it. They do hunger for community, but their community is on their phone. Faith is crucial, but unfortunately, parents aren't talking about faith very much. And so when it comes to leadership, they want to be inspired. They want to be engaged. They want to have meaning. And what influences them? Chatbots, AI. Their marketing is real time. Right now, what they see in front of them is what they're gonna buy. So understanding the social media influence, parenting.com, I think, parentmagazine.com, recognizing for Gen Alpha exposes them to a lot more social media. There's a lot more peer pressure, a lot more voices than just their in-person friends. So they're seeing, hearing, engaging with people beyond their community, which makes the community bigger, and they are wanting community. But then they're also seeing sex, violence on their screens a lot more. For this generation, there is a higher level of depression and that idea of fear of missing out. And what they're seeing on their phones is, ooh, I wish I could be doing that. And that's guiding more of their hopes and dreams and aspirations. Bullying, it's not necessarily those in their room, in their classroom. It's all of it on the phone.
Excuse me, can you back up just a second? What lack of feeling wrong? What?
There's no repercussion for
Okay.
bullying someone online.
Right. Okay.
They think it's okay because you can't see my face.
Right. This article suggests that sexual activity has declined, but they are having less safe sex. So there's more instances of STDs and pregnancies. Drug use is down, but the rise in overdoses because parents have multiple drugs in the house. It's easier access to fentanyl. We had a case in Newberry. She smoked marijuana, but it was laced, and so she was out of her mind for 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, just, it was laced with the elephant tranquilizer. Yeah, so the drugs are worse, if you will, when it comes to some of those overdoses and fentanyl and some of the other things. Kids who drink alcohol are finding better flavored alcohol than not cheer wine. Boone's strawberry wine. But when you think about all of the infused liquors that are out there now, they're finding that easier to get, and it tastes good, so they're going to try it, and it's not going to taste like beer. Obesity and body issues, again, you're seeing so many other viewpoints and other people, and remember what you only see 10 seconds, 15 seconds of someone's life on the phone, and that's what they're dreaming of. They don't see the other things that go into it. But also with this generation, they have and are feeling the pressure to succeed. I must get an A. I must get an A. I must do this so that I can get into college or go do whatever. One of the other articles that I researched and had to present to my class was understanding the struggles for religious and spiritual struggles. And this particular article defined them in 6 ways: struggles with the divine, struggles with the demonic, interpersonal struggles, moral struggles, meaning struggles, and doubt struggles. So any of the conflicts, any of the tension, any of the anxieties or fears that we face with our youth are going to fall under one of those 6 areas. So let's take a look at Mark 5. This is really one of my favorite Bible stories in Scripture. There's so many things about this that makes my heart sing. In this story, Jesus crosses the other side, gets out of the boat. Jairus comes up, and think about this. And one of the articles described it as, think about it as Chicago Med and ER and house. Can you see all of the things that are going on in this story? And a large crowd is pressing in on Jesus, and Jairus, doctor, come over here, lay your hands, come to my house and lay your hands on my daughter. And then all of a sudden, as they're walking along, they're walking Soda City, and it's the crowd is, or the state fair, and it's crowded. And all of a sudden, a woman reaches out and touches the hem of Jesus' cloak, thinking, if I just but touch, I will be made well. And her hemorrhage stops. But Jesus draws the attention of the crowd. Who touched my clothes? His disciples like, look around, Jesus, all of us have touched your clothes. What are you talking about? And the woman falls down before him and tells him the truth. And he says to her, daughter, your faith has made you well, go in peace, be healed. But then another crowd comes barreling in from Jairus's house, and your daughter is dead. Why trouble him any longer? And Jesus says, do not fear, only believe. And so Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, go into the house. They see the commotion, they see the wailers weeping and wailing, and they're laughing at Jesus because Jesus says the child is not dead but sleeping. Get them out of the house, and he says, little girl, get up and have something to eat. Some of the important pieces about this is understanding the impurity Levitical laws. If you touch or touch blood, you are impure and ritually impure. And so you have to wait 7 days and then go to the priest and be cleansed. Same goes with the dead body. You would be impure for 7 days. So Jairus is the leader of that community, and so then would have been unclean. Think about all of the doctors unable to heal the hemorrhaging woman or the dying child. And both the child was 12 years old and the woman hemorrhaged for 12 years. She had her period for 12 years constantly. Like I said, this goes on and on. These are not my slides. I'm not that smart, but just all of the comparisons and similarities just go on and on and on. So you could kind of imagine that the woman and Jairus and the daughter are all fearful and anxious and upset. So I want to talk about in this story, both the woman and the little girl are called daughter. Jesus exhorts them against their fear of loss, fear of death, fear of what could be, and invites them to have faith. Vindicates the woman's faith and encourages Jairus to have faith. Both are dealing with apprehensions. Think about the woman, okay, I can reach out and touch his hem, might be healed, might not be, but hopefully I am. But then if she does get caught defiling a holy teacher, Jesus would have been unclean for 7 days, or facing an angry mob for even attempting. Both then the apprehension of Jairus, agonizing over his daughter dying. What if Jesus can't heal her? What would my life be like? And again, full of anxiety, hearing that she has already died. And then Jesus says, don't play into that. She is just sleeping. Both characters approach Jesus and are experiencing high levels of anxiety. Y'all can feel that, y'all can sense that, y'all can gain that. The hemorrhaging woman is about living a dead life because she can't interact with anyone. She can't talk. She can't be near anyone. And Jairus is anxious about having a child who dies. So let's talk a little bit about what is anxiety, what is fear, what are our students, what are our youth, what are they fearful, and what are they anxious over?
Anxious over the unknown.
Unknown, yeah.
Yeah, not sure what's gonna come next.
Their safety, school
Safety,
shootings.
School shootings. I have a college campus ministry student who has anxiety about crossing the road. And so currently she lives, live on the main campus, but coming to the campus ministry house freaks them out. Right? So psychologists think about anxiety as related to circumstances that are uncontrollable or unavoidable. Fear is escape or avoidance. The fear, fight or flight, right? Another way to look at it is future oriented versus present mood. But for our youth, they can't distinguish between distress, nervousness, uneasiness, anxiety, and fear. Their brain hasn't developed. So all of those things that we've been talking about earlier, peer pressure, violence, depression, bullying, sex, drug use, alcohol, body issues, it's all the same because their brains haven't developed. and won't until age 25. And so they can't distinguish between fear and anxiety. And so we as adults need to be careful of our own anxieties, our own fears, and transferring that on them. So if someone comes to you and says, what do you mean? Uh, whatever scenario, we need to be mindful of our own story, our own situation. I want to throw in the 4 types of parenting, authoritarian versus authoritative versus permissive versus uninvolved. We all have parents that are all of these things. But the reason I want to raise these ideas or authoritarian, the 4 types of parents is this idea of good enough. If we are trying to help our children succeed, are we overbearing? Are we, you will do it this way? Oh, see what you can do, or not involved? Or are we trying to create a space for children to develop themselves and figure out what's needed kind of in the moment? The author suggests that a good enough mother assumes that the mother is not agitated by her failures, but is rather calm and collected, and meets the demands of the infant. A toddler goes and runs and tumbles over. How do we react? Oh my gosh, you fell over. Well, then that creates kind of that anxiety for falling over. Or is it, you're fine, dust yourself off, right? There's somewhere there's a balance in that. All right, pick yourself up, hug, okay, go play. So in a sense, we're creating space for our youth to have what they need, and we're dealing with our own anxieties, and that we are composed so that they can figure out and learn it themselves. So this author suggests that Jesus, especially in this text, Jesus is the composed mother, creates an environment for both to develop faith and autonomy, to develop what they need to survive and move forward. Jesus presents calmness other than drawing out the woman in the crowd, but makes space for her to overcome that anxiety, to grow in their faith. So when Jesus says to the woman, your faith has made you well, what it means is when you feel anxious, what I have given you will be good enough. Good enough for you to depend on. And even with Jairus, all that you need to do is believe. When you feel out of control and that anxiety overwhelms you, the faith that I've given you is good enough to depend on. And you can trust through faith. So I'm proposing this idea of, as a youth leader, being a good enough youth leader, helping that youth that comes to you with a brand new experience of meeting a Palestinian Lutheran pastor, and your parents are Israel supporters. When you meet a trans student, when you want to help feed the homeless, and we have to do that through a certain organization. Well, what does that mean? How do we pause in the midst of our own anxieties to hear what they're trying to learn and what they're trying to grow? I almost threw this in here, somewhere around in here, the video of, Dad, where did we come from? And the dad's like, well, let me tell you about the birds and the bees. Your mom loved each other. And he's like, oh, I thought we came from Boston. Right? Being good enough is asking a little more about what they're inquiring about. recognizing you don't know all of the answers, recognizing your own faults, but you're calm and collected in the midst of it to help them grow in their autonomy. And so again, I suggest that the good enough youth leader is someone who is non-anxious, and it is composed, even if it doesn't seem like it. You step into that mode, into that moment, into that space, and help others calm down in the midst of it. Recognizing our own parenting abilities, authoritative, permissive, or uninvolved. Do we just give them knives and go play in the street? Or don't do that? What if we are good enough for the situation? What if we are good enough for all of the youth in our care, in our midst, who come to us for questions? And this is from Faith in Ferguson. Remember the shooting in St. Louis, Missouri, the violent mobs, the protests, the anger that was felt in the midst of that, and pastors, lay leaders, imams, religious leaders stepped into the space between the police and the young adults and made space. And so out of that suggested making sure that you have a safe place, that you pray continuously, and you don't have to say anything, but keep praying in the midst of all of that and ask those questions. When there's anger, being able to kind of shield that person from the others in the group or the differences, that appropriate touch, listening in the silence. I have one of the committee meetings that I go to, it drives me nuts. The leader has to talk all the time. It's like, calm down, pause. Let's listen. Let's figure out what's going on. All the while thinking about what may go wrong, but being able to move beyond it.
Anyway. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started then. I'm going to talk about special needs, children and youth. And Amanda, I don't think you were here. I know you had come. Anyway, I had asked someone who actually does special needs ministry at her church. And she called me Thursday afternoon and had a death in her family. And so she sent me some notes. So if I'm sitting here reading, even though I've read over them several times, and if I stumble, please excuse me. But I did want to start for a moment talking about difficult youth. We've all had kids at one time who cause trouble or drama, who play on their cell phones, maybe disrespectful, generally just seem angry at something, at the world, okay? And so although we love them as much as we love our others, even though we're probably frustrated with them, sometimes it feels like we are constantly sacrificing the quality of ministry to the other kids for the sake of that one or two kids. And when I say kids, I'm referring to all ages, not just children. When I had my first encounter like that, Pastor Dan, some of y'all may know Pastor Dan, he was the pastor at Pisgah at the time, gave me this advice: never sacrifice the ministry to all the kids for the sake of one or even a couple. If the others are not receiving the attention they need and the time to focus on God, then it's time to do something. The plan that I followed, that Pastor Dan and I came up with and followed after that even, and y'all please insert information or suggestions, sat down with them first and talked with them privately, each one of them, not together, but privately, and asked them why. First of all, why did they come? Because their behavior reflects that they don't want to be there. And they didn't. And, they were made to come. It was confirmation and youth. And so they were made to come. And remind them that you love them, but not their behavior. Always love the child, not their behavior, and give them a chance to change the attitude on their own. If it continues, talk to them again, but this time tell them that if things don't change by next week, you're going to talk to their parents and follow through. If you, whatever you tell them you're gonna do, follow through. I didn't follow this plan. And so I got very frustrated one Sunday afternoon and I sent them out of the room, told them to call their parents, come get them. I mean, I was that angry and I don't get angry that often.
So it'd be a lot to make Deb angry.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
does. But I was at that point and they did. And they called their parents and they left and the tension in the room went down 100%. The kids who were there, who were always being bullied, they started talking, answering questions, and it made a huge difference. And so then our plan was that the parents would come to the next couple of classes with them to see how things went. But the plan, it was if the parents didn't come, then they weren't going to be able to come either for a couple of weeks. And if you do that, I suggest that you always stay in touch. If you suspend anybody from coming, remind them that you're there, that you love them, but stay in touch with them during those times. Okay. Anybody else have suggestions or ideas for dealing with difficult youth, kids? Okay. Well, let's talk about including children with disabilities in the life of the church. And again, when I say children, I'm referring to children and youth, okay? And individuals and families living with disabilities sometimes experience unintentional exclusion in the church. The unity of the body of Christ shouldn't only include those with certain abilities. God calls us to include those who are differently abled. And so I'm going to start off by identifying the populations under the special needs umbrella. There are the intellectual and developmental disabilities. These refer to challenges in adaptive behavior, skills needed to function in everyday life, in addition to difficulties in cognitive functioning. That's problem solving, reasoning. Down syndrome and other sources of mental retardation and traumatic brain injuries are included in this category. My mother's youngest sister had Down syndrome, and one of my cousins. And so there were three of my sister and three cousins became special ed teachers, and two of my nieces are special ed teachers. So it's very close to our hearts. There are the physical disabilities, and these, of course, refer to challenges that affect a person's daily functioning, stamina, or coordination. Physical disabilities can occur on their own or with another disability. They include hearing impairment, vision impairment, cerebral palsy, seizure disorders, those requiring occupational or physical therapy, severe food allergies, and celiac disease. Behavior emotional disorders, these challenges that cause children to have difficulty building and maintaining appropriate social relationships. They may display inappropriate behaviors and reactions to otherwise benign interactions, or have a general mood of aggression, depression, or unhappiness. These disorders include ADD, ADHD, conduct disorder, panic disorder, and some mental illnesses, oppositional defiant disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. And then we have autism and autism spectrum disorders. This is a complex set of disorders that affect a child's ability to build and maintain social relationships, tolerate typical activities within their environment, texture, sounds, or lights, and effectively communicate desires and needs. These disorders may affect sleep and gastrointestinal function. This includes autism, pervasive development disorder, or PDD, and Asperger's syndrome. Now, I'm not positive, but I was told that they no longer diagnose Asperger's.
Correct.
Okay. That they are on the spectrum.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not sure about the PDD. Do you know I don't know anything about that, so,
Oh, yes, they do, sorry.
they do diagnose that?
Mhm.
Okay. I have a great nephew who is on the spectrum, so learning
Mhm.
about that one.
One of the things I've thought about, and where I've started thinking about it is, our pledge education for our fraternity. We're trying to get them to memorize 3 paragraphs and they can't do it. And all of a sudden, oh, we'll have a learning, 501, what is it? 504, with the college. I'm like, oh, that might have been helpful for me to know
Yeah,
to help them learn. And I'm thinking about that for confirmation. If our pastors don't know the learning styles of our kids, and you're feeding it in their heads, you need to learn Martin Luther,
and you're lecturing.
and you're lecturing. Which well, I know there are some that still.
There are
Well, now
ones that still do.
Well, now there are some kids that, because of their behavior, they've been dismissed from the classroom and hasn't learned. Yeah, a lot of people don't. So it may not be that they are totally on a spectrum, or it could be they're on a spectrum and hadn't been diagnosed. But it could be that they've just had trouble learning to read. My son could read, but right after he read a paragraph, he couldn't tell you what he read. So it was comprehension
Mhm.
that he had an issue with. So I bought him books by Dean Koontz. He loved reading Dean Koontz. So he read book after book after book after book, and his reading improved. But you got to have somebody, and I don't know, is this classroom teacher? I don't know. It's just, there you go, I'm sorry.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the needs of the different groups. For those with developmental intellectual disabilities. Speed, you want to keep things at a steady pace, not too fast, but not way slow, because keep in mind, you may have if you've got a class with children, differently abled and abled children, then you gotta engage all of them. And so you've got to just keep a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow. And you just kind of have to work, I think, with that group, get to know them a little bit to figure out what that is. Okay. Auditory memory, a lot of times they don't remember. And so you have to repeat things. Repetition, of course, like I said, you have to repeat things. Connections and experiences, try to connect what you're doing with what you've already done. For example, you're going to use a lot of different multiple pathways. You're going to teach the same concept, but maybe do it 2 or 3 different ways. Okay. And of course, it gives some examples: dramatic storytelling, sculpting, recreating a scene with blocks, researching and rebuilding a model of where Jesus preached, creating a class picture book are just samples of those. Okay, and I think there's some later too. Okay, those with physical disabilities, to me, that's fairly depending on what that disability is. But location of materials, if you have a child in a wheelchair, you've got to have them things lower where they can get to it. From clean, be very clean. If you have with severe allergies and celiac disease, you got to be very careful about cross-contamination. Space around tables and chairs, keep your walkways clear. Soft surfaces, and this one I had never thought about, but if you have a child who suffers from seizure disorder, you need some soft surfaces. Hadn't thought about it. You can't have blankets and mats in the whole room, but you can have a section where you can put that child if you need to. And then you also soft surfaces for sound absorption. If you have children who have hearing impairments, for example, and there's voices in the background, a lot of time that they can't hear because there's too much noise in the background. So those soft surfaces will help alleviate some of that. And then, of course, adaptations to games. You can't have a lot of physical games if you've got a child who has a physical disability.
Or allergy to latex. You can't play
Oh.
balloon games.
That's a very good point. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, you gotta know those allergies. One thing I always like to do, and this may be hard to do at a Synod event, but easier to do in your own groups, is to, at the start of the year, all about me. And so if you've got some kind of allergies, then you need to know about it. Like, Pisgah had to become peanut free because we have peanut allergies. Okay, it was the preschool, but the congregation had a hard time with that, becoming peanut free. But anyway, okay, so those with emotional behavioral disorders, collaboration, and this goes for any of them. Ask the family what works for them. Be in touch with the parents and the family, and always approach the conversations with a desire to partner, not to be in charge. Okay, don't assume you know what's best for their child. Okay, and be consistent. If try to. This would be very hard for me, but your reactions, and cues to help them through the lessons or whatever you're planning. Be consistent with those. Your responses, for example, we will shake the person's hand. We will ask them to quiet their voices, those kinds of things. Okay, and then also for additional opportunities for children who have, what I'm missing? Oh, what?
Just thinking about some of our interesting youth.
Yeah. For children who have attention or hyperactivity issues, realize that they do not fit the traditional mold. Okay. They need opportunities to move and to receive feedback and direction for each task. And it also says, consider posting a visual schedule so that the children know what to expect and where they need to be. Okay. Those on the spectrum, eliminate the overload. For those, sensory issues are a main problem with those on the spectrum. And it can be hard for them to stay in a group if it's too loud, if it's too bright, if it's too busy. This room with all these pictures may be very difficult for a child on the spectrum. Okay. And it's so keep the extras to a minimum. But again, talk with the parents, find out what their child needs. Okay. A lot of positive discussion, be safe, have a safe place. Be sure that all the adults in the room know, but also the children. It's okay for the children to understand that Bill over here is on the spectrum and this is how we're going to do things. Proper staffing, of course. And then on the move, sometimes children on the spectrum need to leave classrooms and groups. And so determine why, first of all, this is happening. Why do they think they need to leave the room? Is there another place they want to be? Is it too loud? Is it too bright? Okay, so find out why and then make adjustments. Okay. And again, ask the family members. That's the best thing to do.
I had an issue where the family did not,
Well, we're gonna talk about that in a minute.
they didn't disclose.
Yeah. And so then that's the needs of parents and well, first of all, are there any questions or comments about the expectations or the identify of the groups? Okay, sorry.
One thing that I think, well, it's not necessarily considered a special need,
Okay.
is something that does need to be addressed similarly with these types of things. We have more and more kids that are refugees. We have, and speaking of this from experience, kids that are adopted internationally.
Yeah.
And things
okay.
like that. A lot of these
Thank you.
fit those as well.
Yeah.
And especially when we're talking about developmental intellectual, it might not be a developmental intellectual disability, but it might be a need that they have to slow things down because they're still learning English,
English.
or
Good point.
yeah,
Yes.
or like the emotional types of things. Being aware of, when we talk about biblical passages where there's somebody that's excluded because of where they're from, or there's somebody that is the Exodus, we're fleeing from something, that those can be triggering for those kids. And while that's not in necessarily all of our congregations, I know that we see that.
You never know when it will be though.
Exactly. You never
Yeah.
know when it will be. You never know when a kid's gonna bring a friend that
Right.
has those different things. So these are all great and I love them, and they're not just for kids with disabilities.
Right,
So,
right. And actually, we are gonna get to that in a little bit.
Sorry.
No, not at all. I'm glad you're bringing it up because it just fits right in. But identifying the needs of parents and families, be sure to remain in conversation with the family. And let them know that you are there for support. Again, you're not there to tell them what that you need to do or what they need to do, okay? They are the experts, and so listen to what they know and what they need. Show compassion, okay? They may be exhausted. Don't assume that they don't love their children if they talk about them, okay? Listen and determine what the church can do to help them. The problem comes when families are in denial. So then what do we do to make disciples of everybody, including those with disabilities? There's not a one size fits all to special needs ministry, but there are a lot of creative ways that all people can be welcome to worship and grow their faith. I think I read somewhere 90% of congregations, 90% of parents of children with disabilities said that what they needed most from their congregation was welcome and acceptance. 70% of them feel like they get it. So there's 20% in there that are dropping through the cracks, unfortunately. So the first thing that she sent me on my notes is to preach inclusive theology. So this is what I was talking about, Amanda. Churches must cultivate a vision of the body of Christ that includes all members. We must speak of the value of all humans and include those with different abilities in sermon examples and vision casting. Those with disabilities can exemplify a life of following Jesus. I told you earlier, one of my aunts had Down syndrome. And after my grandparents died, she moved around with my mom and the sisters on the weekends. She stayed at Babcock during the week, but they always, took her for the weekend. And Alice loved Jesus. And she went to church and she would sing at the top of her lungs, and it had nothing to do with the hymn that was being sang. She would pray out loud when the pastor prayed. It had nothing to do with what he was saying. And she had a speech impediment, so you couldn't hardly understand her. And the first Sunday I remember thinking, oh God, but then the people around the congregation became very accepting when Alice would come. And so they understood she was praising Jesus just like they were. And so it was, my teenage self was just, this is so embarrassing. But she was accepted. So
sorry.
no, go ahead. No, I was finished.
Is in addition to preaching inclusive theology and teaching inclusive theology,
Yes.
one of the things that we have a student in 6th grade who is deaf in 1 year.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of stories in the Bible about Jesus healing people that are blind and deaf.
Mhm.
And while culturally in that day and time, that was considered something that was a no-go for being a part of society. Now I think, and the only reason I say this is we have several CODAs, children of deaf adults. And the pride in the deaf community that I hear from them is, we don't need to be healed from anything. There's nothing wrong with us. We just have different senses. And our other four senses are heightened because we're deaf or blind or whatever it is. And so I think the sensitivity to when we have those stories in the Bible to talk about Jesus helping us see, not necessarily physically, but helping us see spiritually, emotionally, or any of those things. Because I've seen kids that kind of, or the lame, and we're healing the lame. That's really hard to hear for a kid with spina bifida.
Right.
And all of that stuff. So
yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. Okay, so again, preaching and teaching inclusive theology, and that includes those children who, again, may be not from our culture, may be having trouble with the language. Just everybody should be included. Train your staff and lay leaders. Sometimes our lay leaders and even staff, we don't know what to do. We don't know. As far as my great nephew, we never had anyone on the spectrum in our family, and so it was still a learning curve for all of us. And so we just don't know how to handle things, what to do. And so there is some training available online. She recommended specifically Joni and Friends. I think that's Joni Erickson Tata, however you pronounce that. But it's Joni and Friends. And it's inexpensive. And so if you can get a group together to look at it at one time, then everybody's got it. Also, this is a little older. I think it was 2010, but it's from Discipleship Ministries, the United Methodist Church, UMC, discipleship.org, and it's including children with disabilities in the life of the church. And it's actually been helpful. This is what I printed that was helpful for me. Okay. Room setup. Keep it clean, tidy, and safe. Provide space for individual and group work. For children with sensory issues, autism, or ADHD, keep displays to a minimum. Limit extraneous noise, and remember to plan ahead to help the children know what is essential for your activity. Perhaps you have a sensory friendly space. If you have a corner that you can maybe close off an extra storage closet, somebody said. I thought, gosh, that's awful, but turn it into a space for kids to step out of the mainstream, where they can go in and take a breath and refocus. Or I love this idea, a fidget cart. You have a rolling cart of fidgety thingies, and that will enable the children to participate in the different activities and just, move it around. If you have some with sight loss, technology, they talked about how a lady who could not see the service, they got her a tablet. And so she could see the service that was right here. And of course, a lot of churches have, oh gosh, I lost my word. For the hearing impaired, they have like earphones or whatever, some kind of system. For one thing that I have learned doing supply work is the amount of churches that do not have large print bulletins. And for me, particularly, I'm sitting up here doing this because I cannot see that tiny print, even though I wear glasses. So, large print bulletins, and of course, that's mainly more for adults, but again, for kids who might have sight loss. Okay, so think outside the box, figure out who your kids are. Again, if you can talk to parents, that's the first thing to do, but try to find things that will help them stay in the classroom, in the small group, in the large group at a Synod event. Okay. And if that means that I need to buy fidget busters, then I'll buy fidget busters, but I need to know those things. Okay. So programming, form expectations, not rules. Let the group work together to form expectations, but keep them positive. Instead of saying no hitting, we keep our hands to ourselves. Okay. We keep one another safe. We use kind words. We do our best. So let them come up with the expectations, and again, keep them positive. And teach in a way that everybody can understand. Use clarity and simplicity. If you have a curriculum, adapt it to fit the kids in your group, to suit their differences. Or you can access curriculum that is suited for children with learning disabilities, learning differences. Think of 2 or 3 activities around the same concept. Sculpting with play day. Now that might be a sensory issue, and so they may not be able to do that one. So then you're going to need something else for that child to do. Okay, finger puppets or drawing. Have a big mural. So thinking outside the box. Okay, cultivate unity. This one I thought was interesting. Some churches have a special needs program. Mount Horeb in Lexington has a whole section for just has a whole program for special needs. We have Pisgah has a young man who has Downs, and he goes to Mount Horeb during the week for their program. But if you do that, bring them together with the other children. Don't segregate. And one way that you can have them all in one group is to use a buddy system. Pair them up with another child or youth or an adult. Children's ministry does a better job with this than youth ministry. Youth are sometimes kind of hard to get to work with somebody else that is a little different. But it can be done. And again, if you, it builds relationships for one thing. And so if you can do that, that's a great way to keep them in the activities of the whole group. Non-negotiables. Everybody can participate. They just may do it differently. Don't gossip about, here I am doing the rules of don't do's, but don't gossip about any child and their family, okay? Don't post it on Facebook. Don't talk about it outside. Set them up for success. If you know an activity will trigger them, then don't use it, okay? If you know you have a child who lights are a problem, then figure out a way to dim the light so that it's not so bright. Refocus and remember the good, get them back on the right path, and don't remind them of what they've done wrong. Just keep them refocused and move on. Forgive, learn how to modify, and move on. Children don't mean to upset us, and they don't always understand that their behavior affects us. And so the only behavior we can control is ours, and I need to practice what I preach. But figure out how to change what you're doing so the child can participate positively again, and then move on. Don't dwell on it. And sometimes you're going to need a break. Okay. Sometimes we're just not equipped to do this, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And so you take a break, refocus, and reconfigure. Okay. The next few minutes, we're going to talk about safety, okay? And I've given you a booklet, Safety for All, and this is not only to protect our kids, but also our adults as well, okay? And so this, as you'll see, we're just kind of basically go through this, and for those who are watching the video, you must email me, Deborah, at SCSynod.com for a copy of this document, because in the back, it has to be signed. Okay. And I know this sounds very rigid, very authoritative, but we are at the mercy of insurance companies. And so some of this is going to be an insurance issue. And so unfortunately, we have to worry about liability these days, even at our Synod events. Okay. And so for the purposes of this conversation, youth ministry refers to ministry to middle and high school students. or teenagers in grades 6 through 12. And then children's ministry refers to children ages 0 to 5. All right. So the role of the youth ministry leader, it is your role to take reasonable steps to ensure the safety and welfare of the young people in your care. And that's by ensuring that you satisfy the screening and training requirements and complying with the code of conduct and guidelines contained in this booklet. Unfortunately, many children have been abused physically, sexually, mentally, emotionally by trusted members of their communities, including people in churches. And as a result, there are requirements for people involved in any kind of work with children with which leaders must comply. Synod requirements going forward will be that any person who wishes to undertake ministry with children and youth must complete a safe gatherings course, which is an online course, and the Synod is the sponsor for our, of course. Or if your congregation has their own course, background check, you may provide proof of that for me, and Pisgah did. We had our own little video that we had on our website, and so people watched that and had the background check done. If you do that, that's fine, but you need to provide proof of that. And then read, understand, and comply with the code of conduct and any other guidelines contained with this document. Okay, so the code of conduct for youth ministry is written to protect both the children and the youth in our churches, and to protect leaders from situations where their actions might be questioned. So it's not just to protect the kids, it's also to protect us as well. A youth ministry leader must never abuse people, especially children or youth, nor cultivate relationships in order to initiate or hide abuse. Report to the appropriate authorities any behavior that can be considered abusive. This includes speaking to the head ministry leader about behavior by another leader. In other words, if Pastor David is the leader for the middle school retreat and you suspect some abuse, you must report it to him, and then he will report it on down the line. I'm sorry.
Now in the state of South Carolina, they can't take secondhand reports from for a DSS or a child abuse report, so it has to be from you directly. So even after you tell David, he can't make that report for you.
Yes, I agree. But I'm just saying, as far as the Synod, you got to keep it reported. It's got to be reported. Never be alone with a child or young person in their ministry role where other adults are not present. Never have children or young people to their home, or visit children or young people in circumstances where no other adult is present, except with the permission of their parent or guardian, and I'm not even sure about that one. And even if you have permission, that doesn't mean that abuse or allegations of abuse can be made. Never touch children or youth in a manner which is inappropriate given their age, gender, cultural background, context, or personal circumstances. Okay. Amanda may be able to speak to this a little bit more so than I about cultural backgrounds. For example, the last gathering that I went to as an adult leader would have been pre-COVID. What year was that? Houston, thank you. And there was a lot of conversation on in the Facebook group about hair, touching people's hair. I did not know at that time that was a cultural issue. I had to learn that. And so again, that's no excuse. And luckily my children didn't do the clothespin thing. But again, we have to know those things.
I would also say, in some cultures, patting a child on the head
Okay.
is considered diminutive
Okay.
for them.
Okay. See, thank you.
And some autism students don't like to be
Yes,
touched.
exactly.
And we had an incident with one of our college students that came up and offended him.
Okay, exactly.
It's being aware of those things.
And even with just in a regular situation, don't hug kids face to face. Always side hug if you're going to hug, unless, of course, with me, and probably y'all as well, they initiate the hug. You just have to be very careful about that kind of touching. Never physically discipline a child or young person in the course of their ministry. Never make alcohol, cigarettes, or illicit drugs available to children or youth. Never develop special relationships with particular children or youth that could be seen as involving favoritism or any form of special treatment. Never engage in any contact with children or youth that is secretive, whether physical, electronic media, or any other way. Never use electronic communication with children and young people in a manner inconsistent with the guidelines for appropriate use as set out in this document when communicating with people under their leadership. Never become romantically involved with any participant in the youth or children's ministry where they are a leader.
Sad that we even have to put that.
Yeah. Never take unauthorized photos, movies, or recordings of anyone, especially of a child or young person on church property or at church activities, without church authorization and the consent of the child's parents or guardians. So we have to be, that's one of the questions on our registration form. And if there is a child, then we have to either block their face out or not post that picture. So even though it's a private group, okay. Never view, possess, produce, or distribute restrictive material containing sexual acts or nudity. Okay, so there are a lot of good reasons for this code of conduct. Again, it's a lot of times it's an insurance driven, but it's also taking care of our children, protecting our children and youth and our adults again, okay? So just keep all that in mind. I'm not going to talk a lot about sexual abuse because that's what safe gatherings is, okay? And it's very well done, and so there's no point in trying to replicate it. But there's it's scary. It is really scary. So be sure to, again, if you don't have a program within your congregation, safe gather. I keep saying safe sanctuary. Safe gathering will be required. Okay, so guidelines for youth ministry activities. A lot of this y'all know, and sometimes it's hard to practice because you just get put in a position sometimes without no matter what you do, but we just have to try. Guidelines cover a wide array of issues for youth ministry activities, and that includes activities and their appropriateness for the age level, the physical safety, importance of parental consent, transportation and trips away. For example, the service weekend, they went away for the morning. And so there's, that includes transportation. And so there will be some rules for transportation. And of course, the issue of meeting up with children or youth outside of programmed events. I don't know if y'all do that, but going out, getting coffee with one child in a secluded area, not a good idea. Okay. Or coffee or ice cream or what have you. So there are a couple of golden rules relevant, and so if you'll look at those, 2 or more, there should always be 2 leaders age 18 or over present for any children and youth ministry events. And we are going to have this situation because we have this youth cabinet who want to and who need to learn leadership and participate. We still have to have 2 adults because they're not 18. And that, they don't always understand that. Well, I can, I'm in here. Well, they don't even do background checks on children under age 18. So that's what we have to really watch. Leaders should not be alone with a child or young person during an activity and should make sure as far as possible that other leaders are not left alone. Okay? And then, of course, there's also always stranger danger. Leaders should be on the alert for people wandering around. A person unknown to the leaders or not part of the children and youth ministry should not be allowed access to children and youth. I don't know that we really have that. Okay. Any questions so far? I know I'm going through it kind of quickly,
That's
but
okay.
okay. Just stop me if you need to. Supervision of activities, an important part of providing a safe activity environment is making sure there are enough leaders to adequately supervise the activities taking place. And of course, that varies according to the nature of the activity, the age and maturity of the children, and the size of the group. For example, we just got together as a team to plan the middle school retreat, which is going to be at Camp Conard in January. And we are having a lot of free time, but we're having a structured free time. And so we're going to have hikes and we're going to have volleyball and we're going to have this and that. But there are going to be adults present at each one. Children aren't just going to be allowed to do whatever, go wherever. Okay. But if you're outside and you've got a pool full of kids, it's summertime and you got kids in the pool, you better have more than one adult. If you've got 5 kids, okay, but if you've got 30 kids, you better have more than one adult. So it's that, again, depends on the activity and the age. Okay. And then it goes on to point out the ratios for low risk on-site events. It's just 1 to 10 after the minimum requirement of 2 leaders is met. And of course, if the risk and the activity increase, for example, if you're going to do the ropes course, then you need to have more adults. The example I used, if you're taking 7th and 8th grade youth offsite to do an indoor rock climbing, you're going to reduce that ratio from 1 to 10 to 1 to 6. Okay, 1 leader for every 6. And I think what is the youth gathering 1 to 5? Is that what it was?
I think it's 1 to 5.
Yes. Okay, so again, you just got to consider the age and the activity, and also the appropriateness of activities. Leaders should consider what message they're learning from us and the way that events are organized and conducted. Games or activities that could in any way emphasize gender, physical, intellectual, or ethnic differences should be assessed for their appropriateness. Okay. To minimize the possibility of youth being harmed, leaders should consider activities or games that reconsider activities or games that require young people to act alone or in pairs independent of leaders. You know, so think about things like that. Parental consent. Young people must not be taken away from the site without the written consent of a parent or guardian. And so parents should be kept informed of the place and timing of the event. For example, if you're going to take them to do an off-site to do a service project, we're going to meet at 6 o'clock. We'll leave at 6:30 and be back by 7:30, and you can pick them up at 8 o'clock. That sort of thing. I mean, it doesn't have to have the detail. You know what I mean? Okay, just keep them informed of time and place and where you're going, of course. And always they should have your contact information, and you should have theirs. And they should be asked for information about physical needs such as allergies, mental health needs, or safety needs of the youth attending children's and youth ministry activities. And it says see registration and permission form below, but I didn't attach them. Sorry. They'll be attached. You should never administer medication to a child or a young person without the written consent of a parent or guardian. I think in the past we've given like Tylenol or something, but with allergies and stuff now, you have to even be careful about. Yeah, you have to be careful about administering anything without their permission. Okay. Registration and permission forms. Parents should complete a form in which they give details of, their information. A big one is the name of people allowed to collect the child. We have so many now with non-custodial parents who will walk in and say, I'm here to pick up my child, and no, they can't do that. So that's a big one. Permission for leaders to obtain medical treatment. You do need that, but you still have to call parents. I learned that when on a mission trip, I had to take one of them to the urgent care, and they still wouldn't treat them, even though I had permission slip. So, and that's okay. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, you need both. Okay, any questions about that so far? All right, transportation. Parents and guardians should arrange transportation to and from ministry events for their child unless another specific arrangement is in place. Now, I don't know how y'all feel about your youth driving, other youth. It's kind of sticky because you got brothers and sisters. At Pisgah, we had cousins, and so I had to have parent permission for their child to ride home with another youth. That was just me.
Our policy is if they came with the youth,
Okay, they can ride
then they can
home.
ride back
Okay,
home with the youth.
okay.
Otherwise, we make sure that the parents
Right.
are aware.
Okay. But there are, and I think a lot of congregations are now having those kind of policies, especially in their youth groups. A child should not be driven anywhere by someone other than the parent without written permission from the parent. Again, if you're gonna take a child home, then there's a lot of red flags there, but I mean, first of all, being alone with the child in the car, but also whether or not you need written permission. And there was a time when I didn't hesitate to take kids home, not just naive. And then also a time when, all the other children get picked up and you're left there with one child, and again, you don't always think about those things, but it is important to think about and make plans for those. I finally learned, can you stay until her parent gets here to pick her up? So, okay. Steps should be taken to ensure that all drivers or operators are licensed, responsible, experienced, and are not impaired by alcohol or any mind-altering or addictive substances. That's, I know, not going to be the easiest one. All motor vehicles and other forms of transport used are registered, insured, safe, and fitted with age-appropriate child restraints or safety devices. And as you can probably tell, that came out of our insurance policy. But it's interesting. If you have a church bus, for example, and you're transporting children, do they have to have their seats? Well, technically, no, they don't. Is it safe? Yeah. But again, it's one of those things you kind of have to just be careful about. You should avoid being alone with a child in a motor vehicle or driving a child home unaccompanied, even with parental permission. Okay, and if that situation is unavoidable, you must inform, or you should inform another leader of the trip and the reason for it. Okay. Trips away. This is going to involve some of our events. When events involve sleeping over, ensure that the accommodation, where possible, is supervised by more than one person, and ensure, where possible, that those supervising the sleeping accommodation are of the same gender as the child being supervised and do not sleep in close personal proximity to a child unless they are parent or guardian of the child. For example, youth gathering, when you go and you get hotel rooms, well, adults stay in one room, children or youth in another room, okay?
Does the Synod have policies on gender nonconforming and trans?
We are working on that. I do not have a policy at this point, but I attended a symbol webinar 2 months ago, and I've got the copy of the one that they use, and so I am, that's in my wheelhouse.
Yep, good.
Okay, venues should allow for the privacy of all parties to be respected, particularly when changing clothes, washing, and toileting. If a leader needs to wash or toilet a child, they should tell another adult, or the door has to be open, or somebody else has got to be in there. Okay. With that, okay. Use common sense. Okay, safety, there's no reason why kids should be allowed or encouraged to climb on top of buildings, pile more into a car than available seat belts, jump into the pool or pond down at Camp Conard in January. Driving golf carts. Actually, they shouldn't be jumping in that pond at all. Okay, we're gonna talk about communication via mail, birthday cards, letters of encouragement is acceptable. However, electronic communications are part of our daily life and their daily life, and a key way of engaging socially. I mean, I'm sure you've had kids tell you, well, I only respond to text. So, or online, or Instagram, I think that's what they use.
They don't do
Instagram,
email.
TikTok, no. New social media platforms and apps are being developed every day, and no one policy can keep up with the ever-changing landscape, and somebody old like me certainly can't keep up with it. So rather than attempting to create a comprehensive policy for use, there are 10 key principles to guide you in communicating with young people. Okay. So communication should always be above reproach, both in the content and the way that it's communicated. And so ask yourself, if this communication were going to be made to the entire congregation, would you consider it appropriate? And so you have to be sensitive to the impact of the words and images used to avoid offense or miscommunication. Never use flirtatious, sexually suggestive, explicit or offensive languages or images. And you also need to be conscious of how things look. Be careful that the circumstances of your communication do not suggest that anything inappropriate going on. Okay. For example, communicating daily or late at night. So even if your motives are pure, misunderstandings can arise. Okay. In person, of course, is best for building relationships with youth. And so maybe not use electronic communications for matters that are pastorally sensitive, emotionally charged, or that require back and forth conversation. Okay. It's one thing to say, reminder that we're having youth tonight, and another one that, I know you're having problems with so-and-so in the group, but this is what you need to do, that sort of thing. There's a little bit different there. So if in that case you have it in person, and if the young person initiates a pastoral conversation with the leader using electronic communication, ask them if you can talk about it with them in person. Amanda and David, y'all might know more about some conversations that as pastors that maybe youth or young adults have tried to start with you over the phone, over text, that maybe was not the right place and right time or the right way to communicate. So we just have to be sensitive to those kinds of things. Be aware that those who wish to abuse young people may try to cultivate secretive or exclusive relationships through electronic communication. And that's why it's important for us to be transparent. Keep your communications pure and brief. I'm sorry, not pure, public and brief. Well, pure too, but public and brief. Long or intense conversations should be avoided. And again, redirect them or include other people in the conversation. So have to be kind with anything.
Talking about how bathrooms are set up.
Yeah.
Well, did they tell him in advance he shouldn't talk about
Well, I
that?
don't know about that one, I think. It's just that, like I said, it's in our culture today, we just have to be very careful. Okay, and always keep your emails, your text threads, any of those things in case an accusation is ever made or a misunderstanding arises. I don't know about email. It's easier to keep your text, I think, but emails might not be because they, sometimes they go away after 30 days or something. However yours is set up, but especially like I said, your text or conversation threads, you want to keep those in case something does come up. Don't initiate social media friendships. There's a power imbalance that exists between leaders and youth. And so the power imbalance might make it difficult for a young person to say no when a leader initiates a friendship on social media. For example, sending a Facebook friend request or following them on Instagram. Okay. For that reason, it's best for a leader not to initiate, though a leader might choose to accept if the young person initiates.
That's what I do. I don't
Yeah,
initiate.
Yeah. And I know they don't use Facebook, but for the most part, some of them still do. Okay. Safety in numbers. Anytime you are communicating electronically, it's better to do it with a group than an individual. And so include multiple youth or another leader even in the message. And closed groups should be used when possible. I don't know do you have closed groups on Instagram and Snapchat? Does that work like that?
Snapchat does.
Snapchat you can, but Instagram you can. Okay. And you should be directed to the group rather than a leader's individual account if possible. Stuff like that where the whole group, and again, I know you can do them individually, but it always try to include another leader or at least one more child, even when you're doing that. But those are better than just individual text. Okay. Build up the church. Think about what's being communicated on the entire church community. It's important to remember that leaders are often seen or are seen as representing the church. And so consider how you can build up the church community and avoid being divisive, showing favoritism, or making others feel excluded or inferior. Respect others, of course. Don't publish names, contact details of other personal information online. For example, even if you post pictures of a Synod event, you don't name the children. You just, here we are having a great time, blah, blah, blah. Be truthful. Don't hide your identity or pretend to be somebody else. Okay. Know the digital terrain. Be aware of and comply with the terms of use, age restrictions, privacy option, and controls for each site. And then reporting online abuse. It allows requiring mandatory reporting of suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation of children and youth may apply equally to the digital world. Do you know anything about that, Michaela?
What are you meaning?
Well, I mean, are there laws, if you suspect abuse, you still have to report it even though it's online?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought so, but. And again, use common sense. There may be those circumstances that arise from time to time. And common sense might dictate that a leader deviates from their usual practices when it comes to electronic communications. Be transparent, be above reproach, and where possible, seek advice from your ministry leader, if you need to, okay? Photographs and videos. Leaders should not take photos of youth without parental consent and should use only for the purposes in which the consent was given. For example, if you are at a Synod event or even your congregation event, and you say, I'm going to post them here, and that's all, then that's all you do it. Okay. Don't identify the people in the photograph, don't tag them. And, no embarrassing or offensive photos or videos to share, okay? And again, you gotta have permission before posting them online. Privacy is most important, and care should be taken to protect young people from having their personal information being displayed on church websites even, okay? And videos should only be used to showcase or advertise ministry-related events and activities. All right, any questions so far?
I have a comment.
Okay, please.
I noticed it was under one of the things, all of this is also applicable to vulnerable adults.
Yes, yes,
Absolutely.
yes,
And I know we all know that.
yes.
I just wanted to say
No,
that.
I appreciate it. No. And I'm gonna be honest, this is first draft. And so I know there are corrections to be made. So thank you for sharing that, because I will include that in there. I did include it at one spot, I
Mhm.
noticed, but
That's what
anyway.
made me think about it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that really should.
But
be-
yes, exactly. Okay, so expectations for adult leaders. You are there for others. So if you attended Synod events as a youth, you know that there were a lot of caring events, caring adults who gave their time and love to nurture you through those formative years. And so now you are in a position to give to a new generation of youth for this weekend, well, the weekend. And so you may have friends who are there as adult leaders, but you need to also remember that why you're really there, and pay attention to the youth or the children that you are in charge of. Okay. It's going to feel very different from what you remember as a youth or a child participant. And so constantly ask yourself, am I here for me or am I here for them? Okay. You are a model, you serve as a model. And so during the day, as a caring and listening adult of any age, you have a credibility for these participants, and you can show them that it's okay to be a person of faith at their age. And you want to mingle with them at mealtime and group time, and be with them, I know, and I'm bad about it myself, but tend to sit in the back while the youth are all up front. We need to be sitting with them so that we can.
Always had that.
Right, so we can talk with them if necessary, and that's what. Okay. And also, if you're attending on your own, as just say Pastor Amanda is not actually a counselor at this retreat, but she's attending because her young child is there, she will be expected to adhere to the same rules as other adult leaders. Okay. Your own faith grows. Okay. During these times, people are surprised by how much they get out of it as they did when they were participants themselves. Okay. So putting your faith into words for these young minds can be frightening and daunting, but it's also exhilarating as you find yourself saying something that will make a difference in their lives. Okay. And at the same time, telling your own faith stories as a way of saying to yourself as well as the others, yes, I really do believe this. Okay, so be ready to share your own faith story, but give them time to share theirs too. Don't share yours and tell them this is how it ought to be. Okay, visit with your friends. Again, your number one priority is the children and youth even when you're not in the session during free time, but you are still have some free time to visit with other adults, and you can catch up with old friends and meet new ones. But don't forget that you're there for the kids, but it's also a good time to work on your own vocational discernment, as it says here. Where is God leading you to serve in the life of the church and the world? And you may come to find out you've been called to do something totally different than you ever thought you'd be doing. Right now, you're working with the youth, and I'm specifically talking to the young people. You're working with the youth, but you may find out that you are called to work with special needs kids or children in the congregation. So pay attention to your own vocational discernment. Okay. You serve in a role of risk and responsibility. We take our calling to build faith formative relationships very seriously. And part of that task sometimes involves being in close proximity and honest conversations with the participants, such as small groups. There's no way to eliminate completely the risks that are involved, but I am insisting that you abide by the expectations, okay? And that we will never engage in appropriate or unwelcome touching, suggestive or intimate conversation, or any other inappropriate behavior with young youth or adults or vulnerable adults. Again, maintain good and appropriate boundaries with each other as adults and especially with the youth participants. So, okay, one more expectation. All adults at Synod events, including young adults who are not congregational leaders, are required to be in their own assigned cottages or spaces, living spaces, when the evening's activities have ended. That means that when the final gathering is done, go to your assigned cottage unless you are engaged in a specific assignment from me. In other words, when it's over, if you're supposed to be in a cottage with the girls or the boys, then that's where you have to go. Okay, because guess what? If you're not where you're supposed to be, they are unsupervised. So, and it's stressed here. It's just one of the important public safety features of our events. Parents and church leaders are expecting us to follow guidelines and make them confident. Okay. And so thank you for answering this important call to service. And you must carefully read and respond to the following set of expectations for adults. And I'm not going to read over those because those are, you're going to answer them, and you don't have to do it today. You can answer them and send that page, those last 2 pages, back to me by digital means. But again, our insurance company on the last page requires that all adults working with minors at our events undergo a national criminal and safety and state sex offender background check. And so you must annually complete a Safe Gatherings course, which if you go to Safe Gatherings, I think it's I don't know if it's .org or .com.
What was org?
It's probably, let me see, I got it because I just got an email from them. You can either take that course. I want to say it's $39. It would be great if your churches could volunteer to pay for that, but I can't make that promise. Safe Gatherings. Anyway, it don't even say on the email, Safe Gatherings. Anyway,
So we shouldn't send this to you until after we do that.
if you haven't done it, or like I said, if you have something in your congregation that is proof of training and background check, you can send me that.